I bought a GPS tracker on Amazon, and that little device ended up saving me over $200,000 in my divorce. My wife had been telling me she was working overtime for months, staying late at the office 3 or 4 nights a week. I believed her at first because she worked in marketing and deadlines are real in that industry. But then I started noticing things that did not add up, and my gut kept telling me something was wrong. So I put a tracker under her car, and what I found out destroyed our marriage but saved my financial future. Turns out she was not going to the office at all. She was going to the same townhouse in a subdivision about 30 minutes from our house. Every single time she said she had to work late. Let me tell you how all this took place, because it gets a lot crazier than a GPS tracker. We had been married for 9 years and lived just outside Atlanta. I own a general contracting business that I built from the ground up over 15 years. Started out as just me in a truck. Now I have got 12 employees, and we do commercial renovations all over the metro area. The business was doing well, bringing in close to $800,000 a year in revenue, and I was finally starting to see the fruits of all that hard work. I had built up a solid 401k, had some money in a brokerage account, and we owned our house outright because I paid off the mortgage early. My wife worked as a marketing manager for a healthcare company, made decent money, but nothing compared to what the business brought in. We had no kids, which was her choice originally. I pushed back a little, but I went along with it because I didn't want to pressure her, and I was concentrating on building the business. Looking back, I am grateful we never had children, because what she did would have made everything 10 times more complicated. About 8 months before I bought that GPS tracker, my wife started working late all the time. She said her company was launching some new product line, and they needed all hands on deck for the marketing push. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then it became 3 or 4 nights where she would not get home until 9 or 10 at night, sometimes later. I did not think much of it because I know how demanding work can be, and I have had plenty of late nights myself on job sites. But then I started noticing things that seemed off. She started jumping in the shower the second she got home from these overtime shifts, which she never used to do. She would decompress first, talk to me, and then get in the shower. Nope, she blew past me. Her gym bag started going to work with her, even though she said she did not have time to work out anymore because of all the extra hours. And her phone became glued to her hand in a way it never was before. One night, she came home and I caught her in the kitchen before she could disappear into the bathroom. And when I hugged her, she smelled like men's cologne. Not her perfume, not nothing, but actual men's cologne, like she had been pressed up against someone. I asked her about it, and she said one of her co-workers must have hugged her or something. Gave me this look like I was crazy for even asking. That is when I knew something was not right. But I needed proof before I did anything. I am not the type to accuse before getting proof. I went on Amazon and bought a GPS tracker, one of those magnetic ones you can stick under a car and track from your phone. Cost me about $40 with shipping, and it arrived 2 days later. I felt sick putting it on her car, like I was the one doing something wrong, but I kept thinking about that cologne and how she had looked at me like I was paranoid when I asked about it. The next time she said she had to work late, I pulled up the app on my phone and watched. She left her office at 5:15, which I knew because I could see the little dot moving on the map. But she did not stay at the office park where her company was located. Instead, she drove about 30 minutes to a subdivision I had never been to called Maple Creek, and she stayed there until 8:45 before driving home. She walked in the door at 9:15 and told me the meeting took longer than expected and she was tired. I did not say anything because I wanted more evidence before I confronted her. I tracked her for 3 weeks, and the pattern was always the same. Every time she said she was working late, she went to that same townhouse in Maple Creek. Same address every single time, parked in the same spot in the driveway. She never once actually stayed at her office past 5:30 in those 3 weeks. All those overtime shifts, all those late meetings, every single one of them was a lie. I took screenshots of everything, the routes, the timestamps, how long she stayed each time, 3 to 4 hours at this townhouse, then home to tell me about her exhausting day at work. I had the data, but I still did not know who lived in that place. So I decided to find out for myself. The next time she said she had to work late, I told her I had a job site visit that would keep me out until 9. Instead, I drove to Maple Creek and parked down the street where I could see the townhouse. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, her car pulled in and parked in the driveway. I watched her get out, check her hair in the mirror, and walk toward the front door. Before she even knocked, the door opened and some guy was standing there waiting for her. She walked straight into his arms and they kissed right there in the doorway. I got pictures of everything on my phone: the hug, the kiss, her walking inside, the door closing behind them. I sat in my truck feeling like my whole world was collapsing around me. 9 years of marriage, and she was sneaking off to some guy's townhouse while telling me she was working overtime. When she finally came out, I took more pictures, then left before she did so I could get home before she did. She walked in the door and told me she was beat from all the meetings, and I just said, okay, and said, that sounds rough. I needed to know who this guy was before I made my next move. I hired a private investigator the next day because I wanted everything documented professionally. I didn't have time to keep following her, and I couldn't get close enough. I had a business to run. My GPS data and the photos I took were good, but I needed bulletproof evidence for what I was planning. The PI cost me about $6,000 for 2 weeks of surveillance, but it was worth every penny. He identified the guy within the first few days. Turns out he was a sales rep at a supply company, which is how my wife probably met him through her healthcare marketing job. The PI got photos of them together, documented every visit with timestamps, and even got a shot of them holding hands at a restaurant. The private investigator even got him going to my house and staying for an hour, right before I got home from work. He confirmed the affair had been going on for at least 6 months based on what he could piece together. The private investigator put together a full report with everything organized and dated, exactly what I needed for the divorce. Before I confronted her, I met with one of the best divorce attorneys in Atlanta. I needed to understand my options and protect my business before I blew everything up. Here is something most people do not know about Georgia divorce law that my attorney explained to me. Under Georgia Code Section 19-5-3, adultery is a fault ground for divorce. And here is the part that really matters. If you can prove your spouse committed adultery, they are completely barred from receiving alimony. Not reduced, not limited. She doesn't get a penny. That was huge for me because my wife would have absolutely tried to get spousal support based on the income difference between us. My attorney said with the evidence I had, the GPS data, the photos, the private investigator's report, there was no way she could deny the affair. He also recommended I hire a forensic accountant to document my business finances and trace any marital funds she might have spent on the affair. That turned out to be another smart move. But he says something that surprised me. He said, if I am going through with the divorce, do not sleep with my wife. If she came to court and told the judge we were intimate, that would mess up my strategy. The judge might take that as you forgiving your wife. The forensic accountant went through all our financial records for the past year. What she found made my blood boil even more than the affair itself. My wife had been using our joint bank account for weekend trips to Savannah and up to the mountains, always telling me she was visiting her sister or going to a work retreat. Airbnbs, $200 and $300 a night, sometimes for 2 or 3 nights at a time. She bought jewelry that she never wore around me, gifts that clearly went to someone else. There were dinners at restaurants, always for 2 people, always on nights she said she was working. The forensic accountant documented over almost $8,000 in what she called dissipation of marital assets. Basically, she was wasting my hard-earned money on another dude. That is the legal term for when a spouse wastes marital money on an affair. All of this was going to factor into the property division and not in her favor. Once I had everything in order, I confronted her on a night she came home from another overtime shift. She walked in the door with that same tired look she always faked, talking about how exhausting work was. I let her finish her little performance. Then I pulled out the folder with all the evidence. The GPS data showing she went to that townhouse instead of the office. The photos of her kissing him in the doorway. The private investigator's report documenting 6 months of the affair. The financial records showing all the money she spent on trips and gifts. I spread it all out and watched her face change from confused to horrified to desperate. She tried to deny it at first, actually tried to tell me the photos were fake or taken out of context. Then she tried to blame me, said I worked too much and did not give her enough attention. Then came the crying and the begging and the promises that it did not mean anything and she would never do it again. I told her I had already filed for divorce and she would be hearing from my attorney. She hired her own attorney and tried to fight it, which honestly surprised me given how much evidence I had. Her attorney tried to argue that Georgia is really a no-fault state and the adultery should not matter. My attorney shut that down by pointing to the statute that specifically bars alimony for the cheating spouse. She wanted half of my business, which she felt entitled to because we had been married while I built it. Excuse my language, but this bitch didn't lift a finger to help me build it, and she wanted half. Hell no. But the business valuation expert we brought in showed that she had almost no involvement in the company's operations or growth, just like I said. She also wanted half my 401k and half the equity in the house. My attorney argued that the $8,000 in marital waste should be credited back to my side of the ledger before anything was divided. The judge agreed with us on almost everything. The divorce was finalized about 9 months after I filed, which is pretty standard for Georgia. Here is how it all shook out in the final ruling. Alimony, denied completely because of the proven adultery under Georgia Code, Section 19-5-3. She had requested $4,000 a month for 5 years, which would have been $240,000. Instead, she got nothing because she could not keep her vows. Property division. The judge factored in the marital waste and her lack of contribution to the business. She got a smaller share of the retirement accounts and none of the business equity. I kept the house since I had paid it off before the affair started, and it was mostly funded by business income. She walked into that marriage thinking she was set for life, and she walked out with barely enough to start over in a small place of her own. That $40 GPS tracker ended up saving me over $200,000 when you add up the alimony she did not get plus the assets I kept. As for the guy she was cheating with, that situation resolved itself pretty quickly. Once she was divorced and looking for a place to live, she thought she would just move in with him at that townhouse in Maple Creek. She called me crying about a month after the divorce was final, saying he had ghosted her and she had nowhere to go. Apparently, he was fine being the fun distraction while she was married, but once she was actually available, he wanted nothing to do with her. At least that is what she told me between the sobs on that phone call. I told her that sounded like a personal problem and wished her the best. She threw away a 9-year marriage and her financial security for a guy who did not even want her once she was actually available. My sister still talks to one of her old friends from time to time, so I hear things whether I want to or not. Last I heard, she moved back in with her brother and is working some retail job, trying to get back on her feet. It has been about a year and a half since the divorce was finalized, and I am doing better than I ever was during the marriage. The business is still growing. I just hired 2 more guys, and we are booked out 3 months in advance. I am back to focusing on building my future instead of wondering why my wife smells like cologne when she comes home from work. I started dating again a few months ago. Nothing serious yet, but it feels good to be with someone who actually wants to be with me. The house feels different now, like it is actually mine instead of a place I was just living while my wife ran around behind my back. I do not regret any of it, except trusting her for as long as I did. What I learned from all of this that I want to share with anyone going through something similar: always trust your gut, even if it's a false alarm, and investigate why that alarm went off. Document everything before you confront them, because once they know you are suspicious, they will start covering their tracks. Get a good divorce attorney before you make any moves, especially if you have a business or significant assets to protect. And know your state's laws, because in Georgia, that adultery statute saved me over $200,000. The pain does not last forever, but the consequences of their choices follow them for the rest of their life. She lost a husband, a home, financial security, and even the guy she was cheating with, all because she could not resist some sales rep in a subdivision 30 minutes away. I don't really believe in karma, but I sure as hell believe in consequences. And when consequences catch up, they are usually severe. Well, before I started narrating stories, I didn't know that if you slept with your wife while going through a divorce, it could mess up your divorce strategy. Well, at least that's what they say in Georgia. Some men can walk away with the drop of a hat. Some men can't. And it doesn't make them any less of a man if he moves like a turtle, to make sure he doesn't make any mistakes. The main thing I preach in most of these stories is, don't use violence to solve your problems. It only makes matters worse. Use the opposite of violence to make sure you don't make any mistakes. And learn to embrace the 5-letter word called peace. It works wonders. Until next time.